Welcome to the Common Man Football Show. My name is James Coburn, and today's episode, we're talking about the Baltimore Ravens versus Oakland Raiders Week 5 matchup based on analytics. Each week, I collect all of the current 2017 NFL team data in order to analyze and project potential NFL performance. We're 4 weeks into the season, so it's not the biggest sample size ever. However, there will always be little nuggets of truth in every sample of data you see, which could become bigger nuggets of truth as the season continues. So stick around as I analyze each week's matchups based on analytics. And if you are new to the channel, all terms and definitions will be in the description. So starting with this one particular game. Now, it's one thing to get out of the way. The Oakland Raiders are in trouble. They're in trouble on many fronts. One, they lost Derek Carr. Losing Derek Carr affects a lot of different things. One in particular is that most of the data I'm showing you today is with Derek Carr as the quarterback. And because of that fact, it just messes up everything. It just causes issues. So that's the one thing I just want to say is that, again, this is a game where you're going to have E.J. Manuel as the starting quarterback. So that's going to change things. Very limited sample size last week. I didn't do anything with E.J. Manuel's data last week to really say how he's going to perform, but this is going to affect things. Like, this is going to affect everything in terms of all the stuff I'm showing you, in terms of turnovers, in terms of a lot of this different stuff. Like, it's basically a reset for the Raiders this week. So that's the one thing I just want to get out of the way so that you guys understand that, when the projection for this week could be wrong just because of the factor of losing Derek Carr, which I do agree. But getting into the overall data, so the basic NFL data for both these teams. So this is based on how the Raiders have performed in the last 4 weeks, and the Ravens have performed in the last 4 weeks when it comes to offense, defense, and special teams. Despite Derek Carr not being in this game, the overall data favors the Ravens. So despite the fact that even if Derek Carr was playing in this game, the overall data would still favor the Ravens. And let me explain why. When you look at the total D-score, the total D-score is the defense's ability to prevent first downs. It heavily favors the Ravens compared to the Raiders. The Raiders' defense has not been very good when it comes to preventing first downs overall as a defense. Then when you look at the offense, the Ravens' offense is actually better than the Raiders' defense. Now, keep in mind, a lot of this is because of the implosions, Redskins. That really hurt the Raiders. The Raiders started out this season with one of the best offenses in the NFL, and over the course of the Redskins and then the Broncos, it flipped it to the opposite. So, you can't deny this fact. You can't just say, oh, they're actually good. They just play yeah, sure, they play tough teams, but they didn't play very well against those teams. So you just can't deny that fact. So overall, the Ravens offense is slightly favored as well when it comes to grading first downs as an offense compared to the Oakland Raiders defense. And I'm shocked to see this. But again, the Raiders did not perform well against the Redskins, and they didn't perform that well against the Broncos when it comes to their offense. And some of that also had to do with Derek Carr getting injured at one point in that game. But still, overall, this is what the data says. And then, of course, when you look at turnover ratio, the Raiders still have that in their cap, is that the Ravens have been very turnover prone. That's been one of the biggest issues with their offense, is that they just turn the football over too much, whereas the Raiders don't. But with Derek Carr being out, and Derek Carr is a driving factor for this. I mean, this is really important to point out, guys. Like, Derek Carr is a big factor as to why the turnover ratio is not that bad on the Raiders. And now that he's gone, things could flip in the other direction, making things worse. So, again, this one advantage that the Raiders actually have is more an advantage of a player that is no longer playing on the team right now because of injury. And then, of course, when you look at sack percentage, both these teams have been giving up about the same amount of sacks on a percentage standpoint. Offensive score percentage is more so with the Raiders versus the Ravens. So from that kind of perspective, despite the fact that the Ravens have been better in terms of creating first downs, they haven't necessarily been better in terms of putting up points. So that's definitely an area where the Raiders are favored, is because of that fact. But again, a lot of this is because of Derek Carr, and Derek Carr's not in this game anymore. He's not playing because of injury. Then, of course, when you look at defensive side of the football, Ravens are better in terms of preventing points compared to the Raiders' defense, which is, should be obvious. Turnovers. The Ravens have been much better when it comes to creating turnovers as a defense compared to the Raiders. again, Raiders, and the Raiders have been one of the worst teams in terms of creating turnovers. That it has to change. If you're going to win this game without Derek Carr, you need to create turnovers as a defense. So this is just a continual issue that the Raiders defense, is just not very good when it comes to preventing first downs. They're not very good when it comes to creating turnovers, and that's just not a good recipe for good defensive play. Then when you get to sack percentage, the Raiders are better in terms of creating sacks versus the Ravens as a defense. Interceptions in terms of defense is more so in the Ravens versus the Raiders. Again, the Raiders have not created a single interception this year as a defense, which is not a very good thing. When you get to special teams, most of the punt return yardage favors the Ravens versus the Raiders, but neither one of these teams are very good when it comes to punt return yardage, and kick return yardage mostly favors the Raiders versus the Ravens. But it's, both these teams are kind of above average when it comes to that. And defensively, preventing punt return yardage, preventing kick return yardage is more so on the Ravens. The Ravens are better when it comes to preventing punt return yardage, and they're better in terms of preventing kick return yardage. But the other overall sort of data points, field goal percentage heavily favors the Raiders, extra point percentage heavily favors the Raiders, and punting average heavily favors the Raiders. So I would say that when it comes to putting up points on special teams, that's more so on the Raiders. Punting average, again, more so on the Raiders. But things like, getting punt returns, kick returns, stuff like that, I think does favor the Ravens. So I think it's evenly matched, except for the putting points on the board. That's the biggest issue with the Ravens, putting points on the board. Putting points on the board with field goals, not very good compared to the rest of the NFL. Putting up points with extra points, not very good compared to the rest of the NFL. And then, of course, punting average, which can kind of help things as well. But again, the overall data favors the Ravens. And this is even if Derek Carr played in this game, it still would favor the Ravens because of how well the Ravens have been playing in terms of creating turnovers, how well they've been playing on defense compared to the Raiders, who have just been dreadful when it comes to defense, and also because of the back-to-back poor performances that the Raiders have put up against the Redskins and the Broncos, offensively speaking. Then when you look at other sort of data points, so this is the Baltimore Ravens offense versus the Raiders defense when it comes to completion percentage. This overall favors the Ravens offense when it comes to second down and third down situations. But keep in mind that the Ravens offense is not exactly amazing when it comes to first down and third down completion percentage. So I think this still favors the Ravens overall because the Raiders defense is just not amazing. But I do think that there is a chance to exploit this Ravens offense because of those issues in terms of their completion percentage. Then, of course, if you look at the Raiders completion percentage versus the Ravens defense in terms of completion percentage, mostly favors the Ravens offense when it comes to that. So that's definitely where the Ravens show some might as well when it comes to defense. Then when you look at rushing down, so the Ravens rushing offense versus the Raiders rushing defense, mostly favors the Ravens. The Raiders will have advantages when it comes to third down situations, but overall I think the Ravens will win out in terms of first down situations, which is a major down. That's the down that the Raiders have been struggling the most, is preventing first downs on first down against the run. And I think that will continue this week with the Ravens. And then, of course, you look at the Raiders offense versus the Ravens defense when it comes to rushing the football. Not that great. Most of the data favors the Ravens defense. The Raiders rushing offense has just not been working this year. They've been one of the worst teams in the NFL when it comes to creating first downs on first down, one of the worst teams in the NFL when it comes to creating first downs on second down, and one of the worst teams in the NFL when it comes to creating first downs on third down. So the Raiders rushing offense, when people say, oh, we're going to lean on the running game, I don't know if there's a running game to lean on. We'll see, but this is definitely something that has to improve if they want to help E.J. Manuel out, because the rushing offense is not doing what it needs to do to win games. And then, of course, when you look at the passing downs for the Ravens offense versus the Raiders defense, mostly favors the Ravens offense. The Raiders continue to be one of the worst teams in the NFL when it comes to preventing first downs on third down overall. That's just bad. I don't care who you are. If your defense cannot prevent teams from converting third downs on passing downs, then you are not a very good defense. I don't care how many splash plays you make. I don't care if you beat up a poor little tackle in front of you. If you continue to play like this, you are not going to win a lot of football games. And then, of course, when you get to the passing situation for the Raiders versus the Ravens offense, and again, most of this is with Derek Carr, most of the data is more evenly matched, favors the Ravens because of third down situations. And again, this is another issue that the Raiders have had. Even when Derek Carr was in there, the biggest breakdowns against the Redskins and the Broncos has come from converting on second down and converting on third down situations with the pass. That's the issue. So I don't know how E.J. Manuel will fix this. I mean, who knows? But this is definitely an issue that I think will continue to plague them. And especially with Carr being gone, I think this kind of makes things worse as well. So I kind of say this is more evenly matched, but the Ravens defense thrives in terms of preventing first downs on third down. So this is definitely a matchup to watch. Then we get to sack down. So this is basically sack rate on various downs and distances. The Ravens are favored mostly in first and second down situations, but most of the sacks that the Ravens have been giving up has been in third down situations. So this definitely is kind of in favor of the Ravens, so far. But I think Khalil Mack will be able to do some things in this game, overall. I think not Ronnie Stanley, but the other side of the field, I think is definitely fair game for Khalil Mack. But we'll have to see what happens. And then, of course, when you look at the Raiders' offense versus the Ravens' defense when it comes to sack downs, most of the Raiders' sacks have come in third down situations, second down situations for the most part, and those have been areas where the Ravens have had the most success in terms of creating sacks. So I definitely think this is in the Ravens' center of advantage when it comes to creating sacks. Then when you look at interceptions for the Ravens offense versus the Raiders defense, the Raiders defense has not created a single interception this year, but they could get lucky this week because the Ravens create a lot of interceptions. Flacco's had issues in terms of throwing picks and stuff like that. So this might actually be the game where the Raiders get out of that funk and actually get an interception this week, a pick this week. In fact, I might actually predict that the Raiders defense will get a pick this week because of who they're playing in Flacco. And then, of course, when you look at the Raiders offense versus the Ravens defense, mostly favors the Ravens defense in terms of this particular scenario. Most of the interceptions that the Raiders have actually thrown have been in second down situations, in third down situations, and that's also where the Ravens have had the most success overall in terms of their sort of course of action. So, but again, Derek Carr being out definitely affects how these, how this could work and look and all the other kind of stuff overall. So how do I feel about this particular game? I don't feel well about it. The Ravens are not a very good football team. The Raiders are also not a very good football team. In terms of how they played in the last 2 weeks, they're not a good football team. The only teams they were able to play relatively well against, the Jets and the Titans, have been shown to be teams that have kind of meh defenses overall. So I just don't feel good about this particular matchup. E.J. Manuel is not somebody that I trust. He's someone who did not have very good numbers overall coming out. And these are basically some of the numbers for E.J. Manuel. This is E.J. Manuel in terms of 2013, in terms of his completion percentage, and his first down, second down, third down conversion rate. These are these sort of data points right here. And he wasn't exactly amazing when it comes to those data points, in 2013. So he might have improved. I mean, definitely there's a chance he did improve. But I just don't feel good about this game because of that factor. I'm going to go Ravens. I just think that the Raiders defense has not been performing well at all. The Raiders offense has had struggles in terms of the running game. They've had struggles in terms of the passing game even before Derek Carr got injured. And now that Derek Carr is injured, I just think the wheels come off this week against the Ravens. So I'm going to go Ravens victory. I think there is a chance that the Raiders could shock the world and come into this game and be motivated and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that definitely is that definitely can happen. But I just don't see it. I just don't see it right now. So that's where I'm going with. I'm going with the Ravens. And, of course, you can follow my other work at draftcomer.wordpress.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Geometrics. And if you like this content and you want more content like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Share this video as well if anybody that you know. And I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Peace.